Good morning, everyone. It's Katrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique, and I want to do a video today on how to set up your loom so that you can work with different bead sizes. So this is the loom that I have, and it's just the Dare East brand. The reason I went for this one is because you can set warp threads across these three different pegs here, and it's pretty wide. I'll grab my ruler out so we can take a look at how wide this actually is. And then here's where you separate your threads on the spindle. So you can actually have up to, it's just a little bit, it's like 5 3/4 inch of a workspace. And I got that, I wanted something wider like that in case I ever get around to trying some beaded little tapestries. And that's one thing that interests me, so that's the reason I went ahead and got this loom to begin with. To set up your loom, you need to set up your warp threads. Those are the threads that cross over this way. And then you weave underneath and in and out of those. So to set up my warp threads, I'm going to be using this Wildfire .008, which is supposed to be the equivalent to 6-pound fire line. And now, the trick to setting up the loom is you will need to add one extra warp thread than the rows of your project. So if I want a 5-row project, I need 6 threads going back and forth. So you need to make sure that your thread is long enough to reach around both ends of the little screws on the bars here. And I'll go ahead and I'll get my thread ready, and then I'll come back and we'll show you how to set it up. Alright folks, so here I am back. Now I've cut off my really long piece of thread of my Wildfire. And just as so you know, there are tons of different approaches to how to start this project out there on YouTube. I'm just going to go with a really simple start. I've got the end of my thread here, and I'm going to go ahead and make the first part of an overhand knot. And then I'm going to slip it onto the middle peg here of my loom on one end. Doesn't matter which end. Then I'm going to tie a couple of more overhand knots just to make sure that my thread is really secure onto that little bolt right here. Now, in today's project, I want to work with various bead sizes, and in order to do that, you need to make your warp threads separated as wide apart as your largest bead. For right now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this thing onto my loom. I've tied onto this end, so I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come across and go around the bolt on the corresponding bolt here on this end. And I'm just going to go back and forth. And it's really important not to cross your threads, your warps over too much. So let's go ahead and try to measure them out. I'm going to skip over. I've got my first one. Let's move it over just a little. And you want to make sure that your threads are going through the same little slots here on your spindles. Alright, so now come over with my second thread and make sure I have them evenly spaced. Then I'm going to come around with my third thread and space out that one, wrap around, come back across, wrap around, and I'm going to come back, just like that, wrap around. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to see if I can get 7. Wrap around. And there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, so now I'm down on this end, and I'm just going to take my string, and I'm going to wrap this string around this bolt. And if I loosen my work up just a little bit, I'm not going to worry about it too much, because you can tighten it with your spindles here. And I just want to make sure I get it wrapped really good. And I'm going to wrap it all the way around. so I don't get it tangled up in anything. I had a really long thread there, but I'm not going to worry about it too much right now. And when I start getting down to where it's short, like so, I'm going to try my best not to let it go. I'm just going to grab a piece of tape, and I'm going to tape it down. I'm just going to go ahead and tape it down right here. And so I've put this little piece of tape on there. So now I want to double check and make sure that my warp threads are all spaced in equal distance apart from each other. And I might want to move over just a little bit this way because I'm working too much towards the right over there, so I'm going to bring them over, respace them. And this part's the hardest part of it, is getting your warp done. But once this is done, then the rest is, just using your own creativity and everything like that. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish this up, and I'll come back and show you how to tighten up your warp. All right, folks, so I'm back, and I have all of my warp threads evenly spaced on both sides of my beading loom. And I apologize, but it's just, I can't get my camera up any higher than this for right now, so I'm just going to go ahead with it. And now I'm going to make sure that my threads are tight. See, I can roll this bar, can unloosen these bolts on the side of your spindle. And to make sure your threads are going to be nice and tight, just take, I've already messed up one of my threads, I think. This one needs to go back over one. Alright, so I've loosened my bolts, making sure my spindle stays popped down into these little grooves here on the loom. And now I'm just going to roll this thing back towards myself a little bit till my threads are nice and tight. They don't want to be, you don't want them as tight as a guitar, but you want them pretty firm. So I've got that pretty much where I want it. So I'm going to now tighten the bolts on the side of my spindle back up. And that's going to hold my tension for my warp threads, like so. All right. Now you may be wondering, like I said, why I've got these spaced so far apart. But I spaced them out this way so I can use larger beads. And I'm going to get my beads out here in a few minutes, and I'm going to double check and see if I need to make any adjustments to my warp threads before I start my project. But you'll also need to go ahead and thread a pretty good size length of your threading material. I'm using the Wildfire onto a size 11 beading needle or any other beading needle that will accommodate your beads. Take your tail end and tie it onto your one of the outside warp threads. I'm left-handed, so I'm going to start by tying mine onto this left-hand side warp thread. I'm going to take my tail and move it down. Make sure that's nice and tight, and then I'm just going to slide it down here towards where I want to start my project. All right, folks, so now I'm going to get my beads out, and we'll come back and we'll talk about how to use the bead loom with various sizes of beads. All right, I'm back, guys, and I'm just going to quickly talk about my bead choices here for today. So I was at Hobby Lobby. I love Hobby Lobby. And they now have a whole bunch of new bead choices for you there. They've got little tubes of Delicas. It's not very economical to get them there unless you go when they are half price. Because as you can see right here, they are $6.99 a tube. And the tube is 7.2 grams. That's $1 a gram. However, about every other week, they'll have 50% off of all their check glass and all their sea beads that they do carry. And so for $3.50, it's a little more economical to get some Delicas there. It's okay in a pinch. Anyhow, this was a cute little thing that I found. They have these little check glass mixtures of beads. I bought two. This one is, let me turn my light around, see if we can get a better look. So this one is Fluorite. You can see it's got multiple colors of 6/0 seed beads. Then they have some larger beads like you see right here. The one I'm using today is the Burgundy Dream color choice. And it comes with all these different size and shaped little check glass beads and some 6/0 seed beads. But I'm going to add to this with some of these beads right here. I got these from Fusion Beads. They were on sale and they were really cheap. They're size 10/0 Durcoat galvanized dark coral delicas. So I'm going to use some of those. And then I may want to fish out a few regular seed beads as we go on here. But this is what I'm going to start with. All right, folks, now we're going to go ahead and get started here. But to start with, a couple of the videos I watched for starting your loom work say, go ahead and tie your thread on and then cut off your tail thread. So I'm going to cut off my tail thread just because I don't want it to be a problem later on. You could dab a little bit of glue on that if you wanted to, if you feel insecure about your knot tying. But now I want to just double check my warp threads here. I probably am not going to use anything too big from my bead selection here. At some point, I may actually want to put a few of these beads in, which I have these pretty little oval-shaped beads. So I'm going to pick one up, and I'm going to make sure that there's enough room between those warp threads for the largest beads that I want to work with. I probably don't have enough room for those, but I definitely have enough room for that one, which to me that looks about like a 6mm bead. This is an 8mm fire polish, and that would fit there as well. So I think I'm pretty cool with how I've got my warp threads set up, so that I can go ahead and start working on getting some looming done. Okay, so for my first row of beads, I'm going to use my size 10/0 delicas, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. So I'm picking up 3 for each row, so that's a total of 18. I'm going to bring those down to my thread here. And at the same time, I'm taking my weft thread and I'm going underneath all of my warp threads. And I'm going to take my finger. Let's see if I can get a better view here. I'm going to hold these beads in place with my finger. And I'm going to separate my beads so that I have 3 beads for each row. Just like that. Then I'm going to take my needle, and I'm probably too close to my spindle here. So give me just a second. I can bring that back down in a minute. Let's get it out here where we can work a little easier. So let me do that again. I'm putting 3 beads between each of these warp threads. And at the same time, like I said, I'm using my finger to hold those beads in position. Like so. Now I want to come back through, and this is all under these top warp threads. So when I come back through, I want to pass through the beads, and you'll have to forgive me, I'm using my right hand here. I want to make sure I'm going over the top of my warp threads as I come back through the beads. And so far so good. I'm just about to make it. And like I said, I apologize. I'm left-handed, and I'm trying to do this right-handed, so I don't have to move everything. I'm just going to go ahead and work this little bit first, because I'm terribly terrible with my right hand. So I'm going to pull this in, still holding those beads into position the best I can, because I've already screwed up by some of this. Now I'm going to tighten it back up. And I'm going to try to get through the rest of my beads and making sure that I'm going on top of those warp threads as I cross over those. So get into my little delicas here. And then I'm going to back out just a little to make sure I'm going on top of my warps. And I am. So now I've gotten through the rest, and I just pull my thread. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. All the way through. Oops. Well, that was the first mistake. I got out of frame. Things are hard to do when you don't have enough room. Let me slide that out of the way. All right, so here I am. I have got my first row on. I strung my 18 beads onto my needle. I went underneath these threads. I separated my beads and held them up with my finger. Then I took my needle and I came back through all my beads and made sure I went over the top of each of these warp threads like so. Now I can slide that down. I'm not going to slide it down too far just yet because I'm having trouble working like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple more rows like that, picking up the 18. And once I have 3 rows on, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about changing up our beads. Okay, so I thought I'd just come back and show you just in case I got out of frame the last time. So I've got 18 beads on to my thread. I passed my thread underneath my warps. Now I've got these beads held up, 3 between each warp thread, and I'm holding them with my finger, and I'm going to take this needle, and I'm going to come back through all of my delicas, and I want to make sure that I'm going on top of the warp threads. Like that. And then I can pull it through. And there I have my second row. And you see how they hold up, just like that. All right, so now I'm going to do at least one more row. And then I'll be back and we'll move forward. Okay, folks, I'm back. I went ahead and made my next first row of my next size C beads. And I'm going to show you guys how I did that. I'm going to step up to some size 6C beads here out of my little check glass Burgundy Dream mixed beads. So I'm picked up, I know that I've worked this row so I could gauge how many I need, and I need 12. So I've got 12 seed beads onto my needle, and I'm bringing them down underneath my warp threads here. Then I want to position them so I have 2 in between each one of these warp threads. Just like that. Now, I'm going to come back through all of my beads from the right-hand side, and I'm going to make sure that I go over my warp threads once again so I don't have a problem when I get down to, when I finish this row. Sorry, I'm get out of frame here, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with the needle. All right, so I've got my needle passed through. I'm going to go ahead and pull my thread. And make sure I went over the warp thread. Now, you see that these beads are a little wobbly. I'm going to show you how I tighten these up. So here I am. I'm on top of this. My working thread is on the top. I'm going to pass underneath my very first warp thread. I'm going to pull that through. Now I'm going to position my thread so it's directly in front of these holes. And I'm just going to pass right back through these 12 seed beads one more time, only this time from left to right. Now I'm going to pull it through. And so that I'm starting my next row from the same position again. I'm going to do the same thing on this end. I'm going to come up underneath my last warp thread. Snug my thread nice and secure so it doesn't leave a big loop hanging off the end. Now I'll come back through my beads one more time, and this time I'm going to go from right to left again. So when I come out, I'm in position to start my next row. Now pull that in. All right, so now I'm going to figure out what I want to do next, and I'll come back and we'll talk about that. So now I've been looking, of course I'm on Pinterest, you guys. And I'm sure you are too. But I've seen a lot of these loomed bracelets done to where they look like patchwork coming down in this direction. So let's see where we can play around with that idea just a little bit. So what I've picked up here is I've picked up 3 of my 10-0 delicas, 2 of a different color size 6-0, then 3 delicas, 2 6-0s, 3 delicas, 2 6-0s. That's for my 6 rows of beads. So I've got those brought down under my weft threads, and I've positioned my finger underneath here. And I'm going to come back through. I'm going to come back through just a little at a time because I'm having a lot of trouble with my right hand. So let's start with these ones. Because I don't want to make sure I'm getting on top of my weft threads. So now I need to get my delicas up here. And I'm going to try to get through my 3 delicas. Actually, I'm going to flip my work around. Like that. Being a lefty, it's just going to be easier for me. All right, and you guys can do that too. You can move your loom around. You don't have to keep it in one position. So now I'm going to get in this delica. So I'm going to go through my 3 delicas, and I want to make sure that I'm crossing over the top of my weft thread, and then get into my next beads. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that through. And I'm just taking this a little at a time because I'm wanting to shape this row of beads as I work. Because, like I said, I might have been working a little too tightly. So here's a drawback to working too tightly. You're going to have to work slower. So I'm going to get in my delica. And I'm going to come through my 3 delicas. I want to make sure my needle, like I said, is going across the top of my weft thread. Now I'll pull that one. And now I'm just got to get through my last 3 delicas on this last row. And come out above my weft thread. And there we have it. So now I can flip it back around and shape my beads, bring them down and snug them up against my existing beadwork, like so. So that's kind of cute. I really like that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another row, and I think what I'm going to do is alternate. I'm going to pick up my 2 6-0s first, then 3 delicas, 2 6s, 3 delicas, 2 6s, 3 delicas, and I'll work that row and be right back. All right, so I completed that row, and what I'm going to do now is, for some reason my work looks flip, but it doesn't really matter. Oh, I passed back through these beads a couple of times again. That's what I did to secure them up a little better. And what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to work a couple more rows of just my delicas. Once again, I'm going to pick up the 18, 3 for each row. And I'm going to get those sewn on. And I think I'll go ahead and do 3 rows because I have 3 here. I think I'll go ahead and do 3. Then I'll come back and we'll move forward. All right, so I wound up only doing 2 rows for now. And I'm going to try to use some other shaped beads or different size beads. And in my little check glass mix, these little flat, like coin type beads were in there. And there just so happened to be 6 of those. So I'm going to run those down onto my thread. And I'm going to bring them up one between each row. Now on these beads, they have one side that's translucent and one side that's metallic. So I'll just need to figure out which way I want them to go. And I think I want the metallic side to go upwards. The most important part here is to make sure I got one between each of my warp threads. And because they're being so aggravating right now, I'm just going to go ahead and work through this. And I'm going to just come back through just like we've been doing, making sure that you stay on top. Your weft thread passes over top of your warp threads. Pull that through. Now let's see if I can position my beads a little bit simpler now that I have my stitch made into the way that I want them to turn. Yeah, that works a lot better than trying to fiddle with them the other way. Or I could just leave them. You know what I mean? Could leave them mixed up. And we'll go ahead and try to get them right. All right, so in order to hold these a little bit firmer, I'm going to do the little trick I did before. I'm going to pass back under that first warp. And I'm going to pass back through these one more time. And see if that won't position them to where they won't flip around. And I want to repeat that one more time. Yeah, I don't think that's going to help me much. But anyway, you see what I'm trying to accomplish. Come back under this warp. And what'll probably help is when I get my next row of beads on. That'll probably help me a lot more than fiddling like I'm doing now. Alright, so I got those on and they're nice and secure. Sorry if I got out of frame, but you know, just did the same step I did earlier of trying to tighten those beads down. Alright, so now I'll need to figure out what I want to do for the next row. And there's my beads all flipped up in the right direction like that. And I think what I want to do is switch my color of delicas. So what I'm going to get out is these delicas that I also got at Hobby Lobby. And these are light metallic bronze 11-0s. Let's see if those will work out. Because what I'm finding out is I need to actually pick up 4 for each one of my rows. And so that means I needed to actually pick up 24 and come back through. All right, so now I've got that row in place. And what I did was I went ahead and flipped my little beads, the translucent side up, those little coin beads. Then I'm just taking my fingernail and I'm going to snug that row of beads gently up against the previous row. Just to try to get those to hold my little beads into position and a little bit firmer so they don't flip around as much. All right, so now I've got that one row in place and I should have 4 beads between each one of my threads. But I'm just now noticing I actually skipped a bead. If you'll see right here, I have a thread showing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out of those beads till I reach that one. And I'm going to correct that right now before I move any farther ahead. All right, so I did 2 rows of my 11-0 light bronze delicas. Now I'm going to come back through and do another row of my 10-0s. I'll snug those into position. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I don't really care for my little coin beads here. They keep flipping around. But for this video, I'm just going to have to leave them in place. Alright, so I've just finished this row of my 10-0 delicas. And I'm going to go ahead and do a row of 6-0C beads. And I'm just going to pick a color here out of my check glass mix, and I'll need to pick up 12. 2 for each of my rows. See what I have. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Alright. And so I'm going to come underneath my weft thread, or my warp threads, I mean. And I'm going to pop my little beads up. And just come right back through the top. Now, here's something I want to mention. If your needle gets bent, take a pair of pliers and straighten it out. If you can't get it straightened out enough, you may want to just get a new straight needle out. And because I'm using these 6-0 beads again, I'm going to come back under that first thread on my right, because that's where my thread's at sitting, excuse me, my warp thread. And I'm going to try to get back through these beads right-handed if I can. I actually took a pair of pliers and straightened my needle. Alright, so now I have that row on. Oh, I love that color. It's so pretty. And it adds a nice little contrast to my work. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go fish me out some fire polish beads. Probably probably some 6mm, because I'm looking, and I think the 6s are going to fit really nice. So when I get back, we'll add some fire polish to our bracelet. Alright, so I tried my 6s, and they're just a little too big for right now. So here's my next plan. And guys, I apologize, but this is just like a work in progress, and I'm trying to learn how to do these different size beads. But anyhow, I wound up getting out some 4mm pink fire polish beads. And in order to make everything fit nicely, what I did was I picked up one of my 11 Odelicas first, then a 4mm. And I repeated that 6 times. So I have a Delica and a 4mm for each row. Now when I come back through, I'm going to have to make sure that I get into my Delica and then go over the top of my warp thread. So there I am. I'm into that first 4mm in the Delica, and I make sure I'm on top of the warp thread as I pass over it. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick my way across like that, as many beads as I can get through at a time. Oops, I must have missed my thread. Hold the phone. And if you do that, it's pretty easy to fix. You just need to pull your thread back out. You might have to take your needle off to get back through, but luckily I didn't. See, I missed my warp thread there, so I'm kind of glad I did so I could show you how to fix it. Alright, so I don't know where my little Delica went, but I'll just pick up another one. And then I'll put this one back on. Then I'm going to double check and make sure that I have one of each. One more time. Alright, let's try that again. Alright, so there I am underneath my warps. And this time I'm going to make sure I get on top of that warp thread. Then I'm going to pick my way back across just like I was doing, making sure to grab my Delica and that I'm passing over the next warp thread. So just bear with me a second, because it's going to take just a minute. And I'm going to continue to pick my little way across like I was doing previously. And I'm going to get this Delica. And I want to make sure I come out on top of the thread. The next warp. There we go. So now I'm just going to get through this last little Delica here and come out on top of that last warp thread. Alright, so then I'm going to wiggle my little beads into position. And there we go. So now I'm going to straighten up this row a little bit by just passing back underneath that last warp thread on this right side. And I'm going to come back through my beads from the opposite direction. And I'm going to make sure I go above my warp thread each time again. And get my way back across. So then when I finish this row, I will be in position to start the next one. Alright. Never fails if you're trying to do a video. You always have problems, but it's okay. And there we go. So now I've made it back through, and I can snug my beads back down. And flip it around again, because I like working from the left. So now that row looks much nicer, and it's shaped up pretty good, and it's sitting snug against the previous row. And it looks really nice. So that's how I've gotten so far. Now, I'm just going to think what I'll do. I'm going to go ahead and work another row just like that. But on this end, because I'm working back in the other direction here, I'm going to pick up my Delica first. And I apologize, my thread's getting a little bit short, so this will probably be the last row that I work before I add a new thread to the project, and we'll talk about that just in a minute. So I'm just going to show you quickly how you would work this thread back in. And all you really need to do is you can just take your needle and you can come back through your previous rows of beads. It's just like weaving a thread off on regular bead weaving. And you want to reverse your directions a couple of times, stuff like that, but you don't want to change direction in the middle of a row. So let me get on through this one fire polish here. So there I'm at the last bead of that second row. Then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come through my 4/6 seed beads here. Then I can weave up through, I'm going to weave up through 6 of my delicas, my 10 delicas right there. Now I'm going to reverse direction and I'm going to go back through those 4/6 like that. Just keep on like that, secure till I feel like my thread is really nice and secure. I'll go ahead and pass through some of these delicas and fire polish here. And I want to get right to the last bead of that row. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to come up through just these 2 6/0 seed beads. You're going to pull tight. You don't have a lot of thread showing there. And I might just go ahead and come all the way out these 6/0s right here. And I can just leave that thread hanging there for now if I want to, or I can go ahead and cut it off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread some new thread on my needle. And then I will just tie back on and start right back in to my beadwork. Another option for ending this thread off is you can actually tie some half-hitch knots really easy. I passed all the way back down through this row of delicas and I'm exiting above that warp thread on the end here. I can take my needle and pass it under the warp thread till I have a loop, stick my needle back through my loop, and then snug myself down a nice little half-hitch knot. And then we can just repeat by sewing to the other end of our 6/0 beads in the next row and doing the same thing down here. Take this needle, come under that first warp thread on this side. Oops, I just let my little loop get away from me. Catch my loop with my needle, then pull my little half-hitch knot. And so now I know I have a couple of knots on there. And that makes me feel a little bit better about going ahead and cutting that thread right off.